Hello everybody and welcome to another video. For today's video we're going to be hitting the PS2 once again and checking out a game called Shadow of Memories, or Shadow of Destiny if you happen to be one of those born in the United States. This is an adventure title from back in 2001, developed and published by Konami. The game revolves around the character of Eike, who, when he's leaving a small cafe in the German town of Lebensbaum, is met with a rather unfortunate end. So he's then pulled into a limbo-like realm where he meets a strange creature known simply as Homunculus. This creature offers Eike an opportunity to avoid his fate, and then, once Eike agrees to do so, he brings him back to a point before the stabbing actually happened. Thus begins the story of Eike trying to stop himself from being offed, whilst also figuring out who is behind it, as well as the mystery surrounding Homunculus and whatever their motives might be. This was a game written and directed by a woman called Junko Kawano. It's the name that might be familiar if you were a fan of the Suikoden series, as she played several key roles in the first game in that franchise. She also played a major role in the fourth entry as well as Suikoden Tactics. She was also behind a little-known 2008 game for the Nintendo DS called Time Hollow. Now, I remember playing Time Hollow back when it came out. I remember it both having a fantastic story and an absolute banger of an opening theme. The only thing that I would say did let it down was it was very, very limited in terms of its gameplay, even for, your standard visual novel. Knowing all of this though, knowing that she was involved in Suikoden, and a game that I do have a bit of a fondness for, has me quite hyped to try out Shadow of Memories. Now, this is a game that I have had for quite some time. I picked this up fairly cheaply from a store that used to be in my girlfriend's hometown, and a lot like a lot of my backlog, never really got around to playing it, despite the concept of it being right up my alley. See, I love myself a cheeky point and click, and I'm a sucker for time loop and travel-esque stories, and something with just a touch of the weird to it, and Shadow of Memories certainly ticks those boxes. Now, it does seem like this game does have a bit of a cult following to it. When I posted that I was playing this on Blue Sky, it got a very positive response. I had a fair few people reaching out to tell me of their love for it and what a hidden gem it was. And a quick look at the critical reception does back that up. It was a warmly received game, with the initial PS2 release sitting quite high in the 70s on Metacritic. Interestingly, the PC version sits a little bit low at 71, and for some reason the PSP lower is very low down at just 54, but it is worth noting that the PSP version does not seem to have had too many reviews. It does seem, however, that when this game came out, outlets were quite into the concept. There are a few criticisms levied at the stiff animations and the shortness of the game, but generally people liked it, with the only outliers being Extended Play and Edge, who gave it a low score of 4 out of 10. But with all of that preamble over, let's just check out the game. Our story begins as we join Eike. He's leaving the cafe and walking through the small streets of Lebensbaum. Suddenly, disaster strikes, and Eike meets an unfortunate end with an unknown assassin running up behind him and stabbing him right in the back. Ouch. Eike bleeds out on the pavement, but then wakes up in a strange room, filled with out-of-proportion furniture, a grandfather clock, and the remnants of a big statue. There's a disembodied voice that calls out to Eike, telling him that he's destined to die, but he could be given the opportunity to reverse his fate if he enters a deal with the owner of the voice. There's an initial reluctance to accept the deal, which I think makes Eike slightly smarter than a number of other protagonists out there. Eventually, he does accept it though, and he apologises, thinking that the voice belongs to that of the devil, and agrees to go along with the plan. Eike is given a warning though. He said just because he avoids death once doesn't mean that it necessarily stops. It implies that there will be more attempts in his life before the night is up. Eike's given a Digipad that allows him to travel through time, and on we go. Now, almost immediately, I'm drawn into this. I'm a sucker for this type of story, and I already can't wait to see how this plays out. And I have questions I want answered. Who was it who tried to kill Eike, and why? Who does the voice belong to? In what other ways will someone try to take Eike's life? Well, I guess I just have to keep playing to find out more. Now, as you can see from the video footage, the game definitely looks like a Konami game from this era. The character models and environments wouldn't look out of place in Silent Hill. Voice acting wise, it is a little bit stiff at times. It's in keeping with the time when they were kind of figuring out this whole full voice acting in games thing, but it's certainly not bad. And I was really surprised to learn that the disembodied voice, the voice of Homunculus, was done by Charles Martinet of all people. Anyway, let's avoid getting Eike stabbed. We wake up back in the cafe just before our death, and in a nearby building is a strange fortune teller, who informs us of our fate and when it will happen. She also gives us something of a hint as to how to avoid said fate. She suggests being around other people. Now, we can travel back in time. We take the Digipad out, we select our time to jump to, and off we go to gather more people to meet at that particular location. The Digipad mechanic is simple. You open it, select the time zone, and jump. Each jump takes one bit of energy from you, and you can find extra bits of energy in each time zone. It didn't really have any issues with the energy collection. They always seemed fairly easy to find in each time zone, but I think it is definitely worth being aware of where they are in each period to make sure that you are stocked up. Now, in the past, we can explore a little bit of the town. We can't go too far because there seem to be these dogs guarding specific locations, preventing you from going out of bounds. I guess it's kind of just a way to make sure you focus on your initial task and don't get too overwhelmed. The movement here, it's fairly simple. One thing I did have an issue with was the camera angle. Now, I'm generally a fan of a higher camera angle in games as it is, but I think even for a lower camera, this just sat a little bit too low, kind of sitting you between his lower back and legs, and not really giving you the best view of what was up ahead. It's not the worst thing in the world, because as you'll see, the game never really demands any quick reflexes or better camera angles. It's quite gentle as far as the gameplay experience goes, but I still think the framing could have been better here. But let's get back to the game. My first thought is, where could these people be? Well, the cafe, of course. So I go back to the cafe, and because I've travelled back in time, who should I see sat there? Myself! So I think, oh, I'll go talk to myself. And then I end up erasing my own existence. Oops. The second go around, though, I managed to gather a few people to the square, the time of my murder passes, and we progress to the next chapter. In the next chapter, Eike is warned about the fated hour changing, but it's approaching once again. We don't know how, but in our travels we do find some time to be sassy about a juggler. More on him in a little bit. You see, round the corner, the local pub is on fire. Bugger. So there's this kid who pleads with us to help his grandpa who's stuck in the pub, so he can, as Eike, play the hero and attempt to go back there and rescue him. And I'm sure you all know what happens next. Now, it is at this point I want to mention something that is remarkably cool about the game. You see, this chapter has two solutions, and by going for one of them, you can actually complete one of the later chapters before it actually really begins. I don't want to spoil too much about the game, but this is fairly early on, and I'll try to be loose with the details. The main way to complete the chapter is you go to the pub to rescue the grandpa, you die, travel back in time, head to the pub before it's on fire. If you go around the corner, you'll see there's something there that is being lit on fire. You stomp it out, crisis averted. What about the other method? Well, it's interesting, but the crux here is that you do not rush into the pub immediately. Instead, you decline the option to rescue the kid's grandpa, go back to the juggler then gives you something. Then you go to the pub, you die, and when you reappear in the pub, you have to get the timing right, so that when you jump back in time, you actually end up inside the pub instead of outside. From there, you go downstairs and warn the man in the pub, and if you speak to him after you've done that, you get an item that will allow you to skip a later chapter. Now, I loved that this sort of thing was possible, and it adds to the replayability of the game so much. And with that, either of those paths done, we move on to the next one. The next chapter opens with us being approached by the young lady from the cafe. She informs us that we left behind a red jewel, but weirdly, Eike says it doesn't actually belong to him. Now, Eike is a little bit of a prick in this exchange, if I'm being totally honest. He tells the girl that she shouldn't be tired from running errands because other people have it tougher. People like him. Now, she tells him that he's interesting. That's not the word that I'd use for it. But then Eike offers to make her a necklace out of the jewel, which he has admitted, by the way, that is not his, but it doesn't have an owner, so I guess it is his now. The two of them arrange to meet up again tomorrow, but oh no! Someone leaps through the tree behind him and our hero is slain once again. Ike's taunted by Homunculus at this point, and asks, how could the person have been prevented from hiding behind a tree? If your guess was, go back in time and prevent a tree from ever being planted, then you would be correct. So we go back to where we meet Dana, and before we are killed, we pop back to the past. Just a couple of issues. First is that the past, in this case, is the 1500s. And the second issue is that Dana is caught up in the time jump, and for some reason, she goes missing? Now, I don't want to say too much more about the plot here, but it's after this where the game starts to really, really kick in and go a bit more off the rails in the best way possible. Here, you were introduced to this family, a brother, a sister, their sick mother, and alchemist father. You get to explore the 1500s a little bit, and of course you will figure out how to prevent the tree from being planted before you get whisked back to your original time. And this is where I'm going to leave the little review portion. We've been through a few chapters and seen the kind of basic mechanics of it, but I really don't want to spoil too much more of the story, so we'll get to the conclusion now. It took me about 8 hours to complete my first playthrough Shadow of Memories and get one of its many endings. In particular, I got ending E. I absolutely adored it, and then I jumped back in to play the rest of it. It took me another 5 or so hours to get the other endings. Now, this is keeping in mind that I skipped the cutscenes that I'd already seen, and I was able to save my game at chapters that had pivotal choices to make. So I didn't have to do the full thing over again. Now, ending-wise, there were 6 main endings to attain. Endings A through E. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's 5. But ending B has 2 variations, which I guess I can see why it's being classed as such, but I don't understand why they didn't do A through or F. Maybe because F implies failure, but yeah, B has 2 variations to it. And then there are 2 EX endings you can get after you've managed to get endings A to E, with just one of the B variations. But I think you'll probably want to get both variations to understand the full scope of the story. Like, each ending is somewhat satisfying, but as with a lot of games of this type, they're all filling in gaps in the wider story. So one might give you a little bit of information on Homunculus, one might give you a bit more information on Ike, one might give you a bit more information on the family, one might give you more information on Dana, and so on and so forth. And then the EX ending kind of is the sort of best ultimate ending. So you can see there's a lot of replayability on offer here. Now, to speak of the negative side of things, obviously this game does look a little bit dated and some things are a little bit off, even if you do compare it to games of the time. I always kept going back to the eyes in this game. There's something about them that just felt quite off. Control-wise, it's generally fine. A little bit awkward at times, you get stuck on a bit of scenery, and that is not helped by the low setting camera. But as mentioned, there's nothing that requires quick reflexes, and there's no combat, so that's not a major issue at all. Beyond that, I don't really have any more complaints here. This is a well-written, directed game. It's full of intrigue, some pretty neat puzzles. It maybe skews a little bit more on the easier side of things, but that was not a problem for me. I really thought this was a genuinely delightful game. I loved how the time travel mechanics worked. I did the little touches like each time frame having different colorization, and it was neat how they factored in some of the decisions you might make in the past to affect the future. As an example, there is one time period you go back to where you meet a young girl and you find out that she's a little bit lonely and would like a pet. You can go back into the future and bring a cat back, and that explains something that happens later in the future. It's not essential, but it's a really cool little detail. One of the other puzzles I really liked later on in the game was a rope puzzle. You have to collect a rope and put it somewhere to prevent one of the deaths. But there's a little trick to it, depending on when you put the rope down. And the aforementioned bar fire thing I thought was really, really smart. The one letdown maybe comes in the form of the main character. It could be a bit of a symptom of the time, but Ike is a strange one. I would have liked to have seen more emotion from him, and I do feel like this was made today. We probably would. It's not a major issue, but Ike seems to kind of, when he dies, he seems to accept it. He's just like, oh, I'm dead. Oh, you're homunculus. Oh, no, you're the devil. No, wait, I'm sorry for being mad at you. I'll accept what you're saying. He kind of goes along with things. It doesn't show too much grand emotion. And that exchange with Dana earlier in the game where he kind of goes, oh, some people have real problems, like me. You shouldn't be tired, is odd. but he's a quirky lad. He's a quirky lad. But everything else in the game is absolutely lovely. The supporting cast are a fun bunch, the location becomes a really neat space to walk around, and I don't feel like the game ever outstayed its welcome whilst I was playing it. I enjoyed going back, seeing the different endings, piecing it all together. It's very easy to see why people have a fondness for the title, and I do feel like I've played a real hidden gem here, and it's one that I do strongly urge everyone to give a go. Now, with all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. Is this a game that you remember playing at any point, or one that I've encouraged you to go and check out? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please also do give the video a like, and subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming stuff in the future. Thank you once more for watching this, and I'll hopefully see you again in another video. Goodbye.